Good evening, Battle Creek, and thank you for joining us again for this episode of Our View, the show that brings the perspective from families in poverty to the table. Joining me today is longtime member Stephanie Logan and newly hired staff, Kamika Tate, who is our safety net specialist. Welcome, ladies.
Thank you.
So, housing is what we want to talk about. Big subject.
Yes.
Lots of layers. Let's start with, why is there a big issue to access to housing all of a sudden? Like, it's always been challenging for certain populations. You have a long criminal record, lots of evictions, things like this. But why now is it so much wider?
I believe it's been a hike in rent. What you used to could get, a 2-bedroom, maybe for about $800 is now $1,200 and $1,300. A lot of families aren't bringing in that income, especially those that are in poverty, those that have felonies, those that have evictions. They're falling short, and it's causing homelessness, a lot of different mental health because people can't provide housing for their families. I think it's getting bad.
What do you think, Stephanie?
Well, personally, I think that since COVID and we had a new president in office, I think a lot of things has been changed, and you have to change with the times. And with the COVID, for us to shut down, not go anywhere, losing supplies of tissue and paper and losing apartments due to not affording to pay rent because you can't work, people couldn't survive. And then people were dying, losing their families. So I think it's just society is changing. And I think we are in the end times, because God wanted his people to get everybody attention, so he just wanted to shut down the whole world so everybody could relax, think about where their life was going, try to get a handle or perspective. And then for me, was to get a grasp on, to try to be closer to God. And I think that's why a lot of things that was allowed. And God wanted to get people's attention, and that was a way of getting people's attention. It's just to sit them down and focus on families and what to do next.
Well, I can appreciate that, but from my chair in case management, I don't think God's timeout worked very good for most of us.
Right.
I think that you're both right, that some things happened during and after the pandemic, and I mean, as an organization, we're just trying to understand it, right? So, we get it that there were a lot of people that couldn't pay during the pandemic, and there was a hold put on evictions for landlords. And so I don't know how that all fared out, but I know a lot of landlords must have lost money during that time.
Correct.
But the rents have all been raised, and not just for private landlords.
Yes.
Well, I guess they're all private landlords when you think about it, but apartment complexes and stuff too.
Yeah.
We did go out this morning just to look around at some different properties. We shot some pictures, obviously, which we'll show, but just the condition of some of these rentals as well. As you know, we recently got a member, and we won't call anybody out because we don't do that on this show, but we got a member an apartment. It cost us $1,650 to move this person into the apartment, and the apartment was infested with bed bugs and cockroaches.
Exactly.
The person was never even able to move in.
Right.
And luckily, the landlord refunded the deposit, but we still were out a month's rent. And for me, it's not the money issue, it's the bigger issue that this person stayed displaced.
Right. And it should be fair housing. Just because a person lacks income doesn't mean that you should be able to treat them like they're nothing.
Or live in a substandard home.
Exactly.
Right?
Exactly.
Which you can see from some of the pictures that we took. Some of this is substandard housing. We have another member, same landlord, unfortunately, but she rented the unit, what she thought would be good. She invested her own time and energy in it. They painted the apartment. They laid some new carpet. Landlord allowed all that. But what they found out after moving in is that this house for the last 7 years has been infested with bats.
Right.
So every night when the family lays down to settle for the evening, they're being attacked by these bats. And the landlord didn't seem to want to do anything about that.
And I seen,
And I think this is the case in several. And then we know that, like, the city makes a landlord register, right? So you can't
Right.
have a rental property if you don't register. But then what are the standards for that?
a lot of people are renting their homes and they haven't been through the city.
So you're saying they're not being registered.
Right. So when you're not registered, you can do whatever you want to, sort to say.
But you can get in trouble, right?
Right, yes.
If you're
You can
not
be
registered.
fined. Because if they come out,
But
and-
tenants might be afraid to let you know that they're not registered because I was lucky enough to get this place
and they could
and
lose
I don't want to lose it.
Right. I know a friend now, her house has a lot of things going on with it. And me and her was talking and she wanted to call the city.
The city.
I advised her not to. You know why?
Why?
Because she has evictions. She has nowhere else to go. So what I told her is, if you call them and they come over here and the landlord doesn't fix up this property within a certain amount of time, you're going to be put out. So she never called, which I didn't think was fair. But at the end of the day,
You were trying to keep housing over her.
exactly.
Yeah, I don't know what the answer to is it. I just know that we're pretty frustrated as an organization. I think we're processing how many Breeze applications a week? Well,
my
we won't say
God.
applications for support. How many are we?
We at least doing like 50 to 60 applications a week.
And how many of them are just for housing support?
Basically, all of them.
So we're seeing all these families, and I mean, there's always been a group that gets sort of kind of left out because, like you said, maybe they have a lot of felonies and or they have evictions or there's been issues with previous rentals and landlords are scared to give those people opportunities, and I can understand that. But it's never been as bad as it is now,
Right.
where even some of our local apartment complexes, you know, the rent's $850 a month, but they want you to be able to prove that you can pay 3 times that you make 3 times. That's $2,400.
Right, right.
And that doesn't sound like a lot of money to most, but to our folks it is. They don't have that kind of income, and
Right.
we don't have enough subsidized housing. I mean, I talked to the Battle Creek Housing Commission the other day, and they're just bogged down by the weight of all this homelessness too. They're backed up on applications.
Neighborhood.
The housing or the the waiting list for the housing commission is long. And organizations, like neighborhoods and other places that are helping, and we get aggravated with them because it takes so long, but their list is so long.
And what I'm starting to see as they come in with the Breeze applications, this is not just affecting people with felonies. It's affecting disabled people.
Because they don't make enough money, right? If I
Exactly.
only make $800 a month,
And housing, and you can't even get housing based on our income. And then even if it's HUD housing, you don't even meet the qualifications because the guidelines of how much you can make.
Yeah.
So it forces them, if you get a job, you only can make so much. And then when you make so much, if you need food stamps or anything like that, they really cut you off. So it's like you're trying, but it's like a catch-22. Once you try, then you get taken off. So the barrier is with that is, I think we need to talk to our Congress people and let them do a petition to make sure that people are getting off the street, and people trying to keep their homes because
I don't know. What I see across the country is that when communities own the issue and try new things towards it, communities are doing some solvable things. They're doing some things that work. I think that Battle Creek is as well. I'm not knocking Battle Creek. I think they're doing some things. but I'm also not convinced that it's always the right things either, or that all the right voices are at the table to build the right thing.
Right.
And I also know at the end of the day what it is that we see and what we hear from our families. You know, we're working with some families from Oak Forest Mobile Home Park. Some of these residents have been without running water for 2 years. Living in a home without running water for 2 years. I mean, just let that sink in for a
Right.
minute, because this is the United States.
Right.
This isn't a third world country. You
Right.
don't live without running water like that. And the thing that mind boggles me is that the city is aware of it, which it is in Emmett Township.
Right.
But Emmett Township is aware of it too. And there are these little glitches. You know, Emmett Township doesn't have an inspector that is trained to inspect for mobile homes. And so determining whether or not this is the individual trailer owner's issue or the trailer park's responsibility, they can't decipher that.
Right.
But there are certified inspectors at the city. It's just a request. So this is about bureaucracy and paperwork at this issue, this juncture. And we have residents who are being served eviction by that trailer park every month. They're in court trying to fight this thing.
Right.
And the living conditions are terrible.
Right.
Exactly.
And Oak Forest doesn't own that, by the way. There are
Right.
several mobile home parks. I mean, some are good, some are bad, some are
Right.
questionable. But across our state, there is an issue. And it seems to me that every time we faced one, they say, well, LARA, the licensing agency, is what governs the licensing for these mobile home parks. But we've seen repeatedly that LARA doesn't enforce, and will almost tell you they're not the ones that enforce this. The local townships do,
Right.
or the city. Only these things don't get enforced.
Right.
Exactly.
And I feel like some of the properties that's in neighborhoods should be offered to the people in the neighborhoods.
Ones
I
that are
don't
being
think
sold.
I don't think it's fair for, I feel like the neighborhood should have first choice of properties if they're being sold. Because it's our neighborhood, and if we respect our neighborhood and we can have more people become homeowners, it's their home. And you notice in areas where people own their own homes, it's beautiful.
You know, we shot a roll today. We're located in Post Franklin neighborhood. And we shot some video driving down Kingman Avenue, where there is a higher level of home ownership, and you see these nice yards, well cared for homes, decent. And then we drive down another street in Post Edition that has a higher number of rentals, and the story changes.
Yes, yes. And I feel like people that is struggling to pay rent at other people's properties, I believe they kind of feel like this isn't mine, it's not finna be mine. Not saying it's okay not to take care of people's property, but if the property itself isn't taken care of and these people are supposed to be paying rent, they're not comfortable, they're dealing with bed bugs, they're dealing with roaches, they're dealing with different things in this home.
How do you expect
know.
me to want to take pride in it and take care of it?
Exactly. Because look at it. But I do need a roof over my head. But they're not gonna take.
But I'm not going to care more about this property than you do.
I'm not gonna go out and plant flowers and it looks like this and I feel this type
And I
of
don't
way.
even have running water inside.
Right. And I'm walking into this place and I'm looking at it. Why would I want to plant flowers? You know, why would I want my kids to go outside and play if the house next door looks all tore up and, you know, different things in the neighborhood? A lot of times people are keeping their kids in the house because they're even scared for their kids to go outside. Where they
Well,
live
and that's
at.
because of the things that are happening in neighborhoods across Battle Creek where
Exactly.
it honestly is difficult. And I don't know where those conversations begin or end either.
And when you have poverty, you have violence. You just have crime. Because, just for instance, this person can't feed her family. Now she's caught stealing food. You know, this person don't have this. They're stealing, which stealing you shouldn't do. But when it comes to your family,
You're gonna do
and
what
you're
you gotta
trying to
do to
feed them,
protect and
yes,
feed.
you're gonna do what you have to do.
How much do we feel like when decisions are being made at maybe a city level or at a professional level of the organizations that come in and offer services and do things, how much do we feel like residents actually get to give a voice to that?
Not a lot.
I don't think, because if it was, the room should be packed. The room should be packed. And I think it needs to be made well aware when these meetings
Are
are.
going to take place.
And the meetings, guess who needs to know? These communities.
Well, what about the neighborhood planning council meetings? Because I've talked to a few of the neighborhood planning councils, and there is one in Post Franklin. But from what I've heard, it's like the same 6 people that show up.
Right.
There are a lot more people than 6 that
Right.
live there.
You know why?
But do people feel like they could have their issues resolved there? Like, do you feel like this is a place? Because honestly, okay, the girl that you talked to, where does she go then? What
Right.
does she do?
Stay and deal with it.
Until she gets put out. and
I
then
mean,
she gets
it's
put out.
bad too.
Or until it gets so bad she can't live
Because
there?
I've been over there and I'm like, you really paying a landlord to live here? And like I said, she is so uncomfortable. I know how she lives. She's upset all the time just because of her surroundings in her home. She's not happy.
Hey, we have a staff member, and I'm not going to mention, but we have a staff member who is paying $21.50 a month for a 3-bedroom house,
See?
and it's not in the burbs,
Not at all.
and that's not a house payment. Like, that's rent. $21.50 a month, 3-bedroom house, and it's not a huge house.
It's just not fair. I think some programming need to
See,
be
now I liked
implemented.
what you said about why aren't residents of that neighborhood offered these houses first?
Right.
Exactly.
Why can't we do a program for some of these rundown houses to rehab them
Right.
and give families an opportunity to go through,
Home
I don't know,
ownership.
classes or home ownership,
Right.
take the steps.
Because
And
they
have a different way to
grants.
finance these than the banks, because I mean our population don't have credit scores of 620 and
Right.
jobs that support this, but they're paying the rent.
Right.
Doesn't mean that they're not going to work hard and pay the payments.
And just because you made a mistake once in your life, I don't feel when it's doing with housing, you should be held accountable because everybody makes mistakes.
And housing is needed everywhere. Housing is needed.
Housing ain't nothing you just take from somebody.
Well, and I mean housing to me is a basic need. It's a place to go
is.
home to.
Yes.
And I mean I'm very grateful for both shelters in town because folks have to have a safe place to lay their head.
Right.
And so I'm going to repeat again that I'm very grateful for both shelters in town. But they have to have a set of rules and guidelines too to operate,
Right.
which inadvertently sometimes affects these families. You and I were talking yesterday. Children who have to sleep in the warm shelter coming in at 10, 11 o'clock at night, they need to be in bed for school. And then having to leave in the morning at 7 a.m., it's raining outside, and they
Right.
don't have to go to school for an hour and a half.
Right.
And these
Now-
families are walking. I mean, that just breaks my heart.
It breaks my heart.
It does. And that, like, I work for one of the shelters in Battle Creek, and I've seen so many people rotating the same procedure come in and then put in the same situation because they can't afford to rent for one.
Because
Or-
the shelter's not the answer, right,
Right.
Stephanie? Like, I
Right.
go to the shelter because I got no place to go,
Right.
but I've got 30, 60, maybe 90 days at the most to
Right.
figure something out.
Exactly.
There might not be anything to figure out.
Out.
I mean, we already know that if I was there 30 days, that's not enough time for me to get into any subsidized unit in
Right.
Battle Creek.
And I know personally in Chicago and bigger cities, they give you a whole year and they help you get a job. They're planning you for the real world. They don't just send you out, okay, your 30 days is up. They know how much time it takes for a person to get a job. They know how much, and then you got to make the person, when they come in the shelter, you got to make them be accountable. You got to have these programs. They got to sign for it. You got to make them be accountable for their time to spend in there, what they're doing, not just taking their kids to school, making sure they get a daycare, And a lot of them don't get housing right away because housing, it's a process to get housing. And then, you got to make sure that their mental is straight when they're in there. You got to make sure that they don't have another barrier to where we need to be educating them on things what not to do and not go out and do it again just because I have 30 days and then
So what you're saying is there are layers to these barriers and they're not being addressed.
And there needs to be a training on these barriers so that they don't get homelessness. It prevents.
And it can't be a cookie cutter process, right? Kamika and I were talking about that the other day too. The same pathway doesn't work for everybody.
Right.
So there has to be, for lack of a better way to say it, buckets that we can put folks in.
Right.
Because sometimes mental health issues get in the way, and maybe the best pathway is to connect you with good services in a group home.
Exactly.
Because a group home may work best for you not being out there on your own.
Exactly.
And again, what you're saying is 125% true, that even if there are services out there that can help you, 30 days isn't enough to work all that out.
Exactly.
And then the issue we've been running into too is most of our private landlords aren't even taking the assistance anymore.
Right.
Because they did post-pandemic, but it took so long to get paid. That they don't want to mess with it, and they have a plethora of people that want to go into their units that have cash now.
Right.
So why would they? Oh, I'm going to approve Stephanie, and I'm going
Exactly.
to wait 6 months to get my funds.
Right.
No, that's
Yeah, it's a gap.
There's more than one.
Yes, and I feel like when a person comes out of a shelter, which we know in a lot of cases 30 days isn't long enough, something needs to be implemented to help these people get jobs. In them 30 days, a job, we're working on house, we're working on counseling, we're working on mental health, because they're not in the shelter just to be in the shelter. They're there because
They don't have any place else to go.
Yeah, it could be a domestic,
Domestic.
underlying condition.
And just the
Drugs,
stress
yeah.
of being homeless.
Yeah.
Not saying the shelter doesn't give comfortable accommodations. But even if they were the most comfortable accommodations,
They
it's
do.
group living. It's a lot of stress.
Yes.
And then compiled on that, you've got this ticking clock that you've got to get moving.
Pressure.
Well, I want
And
to
if you
bring
have,
this
it's
up.
like a pressure cooker, right?
Exactly.
I want to bring this up because I used to work at the shelter too, and I understand the shelters, and I will say, are beautiful. They're clean, and it's a nice place for people. But when they come in at nighttime, I kind of take myself and put myself in their shoes. When they come in at 11 o'clock and have to leave at 7 in the morning, I wouldn't be able to go to sleep that night because I don't know what I'm going to do the next day.
or where are you gonna go?
And then I can't come back here until 11.
Yeah, I almost wish in a perfect world, somehow connections could be made or resources could be brought into the shelter. Because just telling a person, like I agree, you can't lay around the shelter all day.
Right,
You've got to be
right.
out there, you've got to be busy, and you've got to be
Exactly.
making things happen. But what if I don't know what that looks like? What if I don't know where to go?
do. Right.
All you're really telling me is, hey, after you get a cup of coffee and some breakfast, head on out because you don't come back till tonight.
Exactly. But where
I
can
don't
I
know
go?
where to go.
That's why when I worked there, I would direct a lot of people to the women's co-op because
Thank you.
you're welcome, because there's a lot of resources. I told some of the ladies they can do trainings there. They can get their GED. You don't have to sit around downtown. You can come in and get you some training, get you some education, get you some counseling. Come
Get
to us,
connected
get
to the
what you
services.
need, and let's see what we can do. Do you need MRS? Do you need Summit Point? Let's see where we can help this underlying situation that keeps putting you in a situation to cause you to be homeless. It's
Right,
an
I mean, if you've been
underlying.
homeless 10 times in the last 3 years, me giving you another rent and security deposit or connecting you to the program does it is not the answer.
Right.
No.
We
Right.
need to look at why.
Right.
Right?
Yes.
We need to look at the underlying causes.
Right.
And you're right, Kamika. I love the approach that Women's Co-op takes because really what we do is we have a network. That's the heart of us. And then it's about connecting you to the resources you need.
Exactly.
But we always take a holistic approach.
Yes.
We look at you. Are you well? Do you have everything you need? Then your family. Does your family have everything that they need? And are
Exactly.
you managing the family well and getting the services you need? And then it's where do you live and is that secure and good and comfortable? And then it's career and education.
Exactly.
Because how can you go out there on a career path or an educational path when you have no idea where all these other pieces fit together and you have all these stresses?
Right. Right.
Well, we're out of time for today.
Okay.
I want to thank you so much for joining me, Stephanie. Kamika, you're going to be a regular guest now,
Yes,
not a
I
guest.
will.
She's staff now.
Yes, I am.
Welcome.
Thank
We
you.
appreciate you so much.
Yes.
Thank you.
And I appreciate this conversation today and the honesty. And we're going to continue it, Battle Creek. We're going to continue this conversation
Yes, we
because I don't
will.
think this is something that we solve in a 30-minute conversation among friends.
Exactly.
So I think we'll all work hard to stay on this topic for a minute.
Okay, ma'am.
Thanks, Battle
Thank you.
Creek. Good night.
Thank you.